The sky was dark, but not the kind of dark humans were used to. It was a strange greenish-black, lit by two pale moons that hung low over the jagged mountains. The wind howled across the rocky plains, carrying a smell that made human lungs burn. Somewhere in the distance, strange lights flickered. Amara ran. Her boots kicked up dust as she sprinted across the uneven ground. Every step was painful, every breath sharp. Behind her, the sound of pursuit echoed through the hills, low, guttural laughs that sent shivers down her spine. The alien hunters were fast, taller than any human, with arms like tree branches and faces hidden behind glossy helmets. They moved with a terrifying grace. They laughed again, a cold, cruel sound that echoed in the empty landscape. "Stop screaming, little human," one of them hissed, its voice deep and metallic. "You cannot survive here." Amara didn't stop. She knew screaming was dangerous, but she had no choice. Her lungs were on fire, her throat raw, yet she forced herself to yell. But this scream was different. It was a call, a signal, a command. Something in her voice made the hunters hesitate. Something was listening. The ground shook slightly, and Amara froze. A shadow moved between the jagged rocks ahead. It was massive, bigger than any alien hunter, and it didn't move like them. Its steps were silent, yet the air seemed to vibrate with its presence. Amara's heart pounded, but she didn't run. She stood tall, lifted her arms, and screamed again. The hunters stopped laughing. Their confidence wavered. One of them raised a hand, signaling the others to hold. They were not used to hesitation. They were used to fear. The shadow came closer. Its glowing eyes pierced the darkness. Its body was covered in strange, armored scales that reflected the light of the moons. Amara felt no fear, not the kind that made humans freeze. Instead, she felt a surge of power. She whispered something under her breath, a sound that was not human, yet carried meaning. The creature stopped in its tracks, as if listening. The hunters whispered among themselves. One stepped forward, curiosity mixed with caution. "It is only a human," he said. "How can she control that thing?" Amara didn't answer. She didn't need to. The creature had already moved closer, circling the hunters. They took a step back, fear rising in their chests. Their laughter had died, replaced by uncertainty. Amara took a deep breath. She remembered what her mentor had taught her long ago on Earth. Fear is a weapon, but more than fear, understanding is stronger. She raised her hand and spoke again, her voice steady, confident. The creature obeyed. It roared once, low and terrifying, and the hunters stumbled backward. One of them tried to attack. A glowing blade shot toward Amara, cutting the air with a hiss. But the creature moved faster. It leaped, towering over the hunter, and blocked the attack with its massive armored tail. The hunter fell to ground, stunned, while the creature turned back to Amara, eyes softening for a moment, acknowledging her command. Amara didn't smile. She knew this was only the beginning. The alien hunters were clever, and they would not give up so easily. She needed a plan, and she needed it fast. She looked around, searching for anything that could help her. The landscape offered little, jagged rocks, dry soil, and the occasional twisted tree-like plant. But it was enough. The hunters regrouped, whispering and pointing. They had not expected this. They had not expected a human to command a creature so powerful. They exchanged signals, moving in a circle, trying to trap her. But Amara was already thinking 2 steps ahead. She raised her hands again, and the creature moved to block the hunter's path. Its massive form made it nearly impossible for them to get close. Amara ran, leading the creature with her, toward a narrow canyon. She knew the hunters would follow, but the canyon worked in her favor. Rocks jutted out at sharp angles, creating obstacles the hunters couldn't easily navigate. She could hear their frustrated shouts as they tried to keep up. Suddenly, one hunter leaped high, almost landing on her back. Amara rolled aside, narrowly avoiding the strike. She pressed herself against the rock wall, holding her breath as the creature lunged forward, making the hunter stumble. The human scream had called the creature, and now the creature's loyalty was hers alone. As they moved through the canyon, Amara remembered another lesson from her mentor: always leave a mark. She had to show the hunters that humans were more than prey. She picked up a jagged piece of metal from the ground, throwing it toward a rock face. The metal struck with a sharp clang, sending sparks into the air. The hunters froze, momentarily distracted. Amara used the moment. She darted behind a rock formation, catching her breath. The creature crouched beside her, eyes scanning the horizon. For the first time, she allowed herself a small smile. They were alive, and for now they were safe. But safety was temporary. The hunters would not forget this day. They would return smarter and more cautious. And next time, Amara knew she might not be able to call the creature so easily. She needed more allies, more knowledge, and more courage. A sudden noise made her stiffen. Something moved above them, a faint shadow against the green sky. Amara's heart pounded. Could it be another hunter? Or something worse? She didn't have time to think. She grabbed a piece of jagged metal, ready to defend herself, and waited. The shadow moved closer. A second creature, larger and even more intimidating than the first, landed softly on the rocky ground. Its eyes glowed a deep red, and it made a low, rumbling growl that shook the canyon walls. The first creature hissed, standing protectively in front of Amara. Amara held her ground. She raised her hands, speaking in the strange, commanding tone that had worked before. The new creature paused, tilting its massive head as if listening. The hunters watched from above, frozen in disbelief. A human, fragile and small, was commanding not one, but two alien predators. Time seemed to stretch. The wind howled, the moons glimmered, and the hunters realized they were outmatched. Their confidence shattered. They retreated slowly, whispering warnings to each other. Amara exhaled, her chest heaving. She turned to the creatures, her voice calm but firm. "Stay," she said. They obeyed, crouching beside her, their massive forms blocking any path the hunters might take. For a long moment, Amara simply stood there, absorbing the silence. She had survived the first encounter, but she knew the real challenge was just beginning. She was in a strange world, with strange creatures and cunning hunters who would not stop. But she was not afraid. Humans had a way of adapting, of learning, and of turning the impossible into possible. Amara had survived this long, because she was clever, because she understood fear and power, and because she had allies even the hunters could not see. The green sky stretched above her, and the moons cast pale light over the rocky canyon. Somewhere in the distance, more dangers waited. But for now, Amara was alive. She called something powerful, and it had answered. The hunters had laughed when she screamed. They would not laugh again. And somewhere deep inside, Amara felt a thrill of excitement. The unexpected turning point had arrived. The game had changed, and she was ready. Amara stood silently, her chest heaving as the two massive creatures crouched beside her. The canyon was quiet now, almost too quiet. Only the wind whispered across jagged rocks, carrying dust and the faint smell of the strange alien world. The hunters were gone, for now, but Amara knew they would return. She glanced at the first creature, its glowing eyes fixed on her. She had learned quickly that brute strength was only part of the equation. Understanding, respect, and timing mattered just as much. She crouched slightly, extending a hand toward the creature, and spoke in that strange, commanding tone that had worked before. "Stay," she said softly. The creature lowered its massive head, its tail curling around its claws, a silent promise that it would obey. Amara's lips curved into a small smile. She had no name for it, no understanding of its species, yet followed her will. That was enough. A distant rumble echoed through the canyon, and Amara froze. Another shadow moved above the rocks. Her stomach tightened. Could it be more hunters? Or something worse? Something she had never seen before? Before she could react, a third creature emerged from behind a rock formation. Unlike the others, it moved with a different rhythm. Its scales shimmered faintly, reflecting the pale moons and fractured patterns. It was taller, more massive, and its presence carried authority. The first creature growled softly, its body tensing. Amara's heart pounded. This was no ordinary encounter. She raised her hand slowly, showing she meant no harm. She whispered a sound, low and commanding, that carried meaning only the creature seemed to understand. The new arrival paused. Its glowing red eyes swept over the canyon floor, taking the terrain, the first creature, and then Amara. The hunter's laughter rang out again, but this time it was tense, strained. They had climbed higher, peering over the canyon edges, trying to find a way to trap her. But something had changed. They were no longer in control. Amara didn't flinch. She had spent her life learning to survive, learning to read situations, and to act with precision. She took a step forward. "Come closer," she said softly, addressing the newcomer. The massive creature hesitated, its claws scraping against the rock. Then, with a cautious step, it obeyed. The first creature backed slightly, allowing the newcomer to approach. Amara realized something incredible. She was not just leading one creature. She was commanding a pack. The hunters whispered frantically to each other. "How is she doing this?" one hissed. "It is impossible. She cannot control them." Amara didn't answer. She focused on the task ahead. She needed a plan to escape the canyon, and perhaps turn the hunters' pursuit into their own trap. Her mind raced, calculating distances, obstacles, and the terrain's hidden advantages. "Follow me," she murmured, signaling the creatures. They obeyed, moving in unison like shadows gliding over rocks. Amara led them to a narrow path between two towering cliffs. The hunter's position above gave them an advantage, but the canyon path she had chosen narrowed quickly. Only a single hunter could pass at a time. She turned to face the hunters directly. "I am not your prey," she said. Her voice was calm but carried authority. "I am a human, and you will learn respect." One hunter stepped forward, arrogance flashing in his eyes. He swung a blade, sharp and glowing with alien energy. Amara didn't move. Instead, the creatures reacted. The first creature leaped forward, blocking the hunter with its massive tail. The second creature circled around, its claws striking the ground with precision, sending dust and stones flying. Amara used the chaos. She darted forward, moving along the narrow path, drawing the hunter's attention. The canyon walls echoed with their frustrated shouts. Each hunter that tried to advance found themselves blocked, pushed back, or narrowly avoided by the creature's immense power. A flash of memory came to Amara. On Earth, her mentor had once said, "Sometimes survival is not about strength. It is about understanding the world around you. Listen, observe, and act." She applied that now, observing every rock, every crevice, every shadow. She found a series of jagged stones forming a small overhang. If she could position herself correctly, the hunters would be trapped between the canyon wall and the creatures. Her heart raced as she moved carefully, whispering to the creatures, guiding them with precision. The hunters hesitated, sensing the trap, but hesitation was dangerous. One of them lunged forward, swinging wildly. The second creature intercepted with a swipe of its massive claws. Rocks tumbled, creating a temporary barrier that slowed the hunter's advance. Amara crouched low, scanning for any weaknesses. Her mind worked like a machine, planning 3 steps ahead. She noticed a small alcove in the cliffside, just wide enough for her to slip through, but too narrow for the hunters. "This way," she whispered, motioning to the creatures. They shifted their massive bodies, creating a living wall between her and the hunters. She slipped into the alcove, heart pounding, listening as the hunters cursed and tried to navigate around the creatures. For the first time, she felt a strange connection with the creatures. They were not just beasts, they were allies. And more than that, they seemed to understand her in ways no other life form had. Every step she took, every command she whispered, strengthened that bond. But the danger was not over. The hunters regrouped at the canyon entrance, shouting signals to each other. Amara peeked through a crack, noticing something alarming, a larger force approaching. The ground trembled beneath distant footsteps, heavier and more coordinated than before. She realized with chill that the hunters were not the only danger. Something bigger was coming, and the creature she commanded might be her only chance. Amara pressed herself against the cool rock, thinking fast. She needed to prepare the creatures for what was coming, but she also needed a distraction, something that would give them an edge. Her eyes fell on a jagged rock, hanging precariously above the hunter's path. With a quick motion, she dislodged it. The rock fell, crashing down with a deafening sound. The hunters screamed, diving to the sides. The creatures roared in unison, advancing swiftly while the humans scrambled. It was not a perfect strike, but it gave Amara the advantage she needed. "Move!" she shouted, leading the creatures along a narrow path twisting through the rocks. They moved like shadows, silent but powerful, their glowing eyes illuminating the dark path. The hunters recovered quickly, their shouts filled with frustration and fear. But Amara was already ahead. She had learned to anticipate, to plan, and to act with speed. The creatures mirrored her movements, blocking, herding, and controlling the hunter's advance. A sudden screech echoed from above. One of the larger predators, the third creature, leaped high, its claws tearing into the cliffside. Rocks crashed down, cutting off the hunter's path temporarily. The remaining hunters hissed and growled, trying to find a new route, but Amara was already leading her group toward the canyon exit. She paused at the edge of the cliff, looking down at a vast alien forest below. Trees glowed faintly, casting eerie light on the forest floor. The creatures crouched beside her, waiting for the signal. Amara inhaled deeply, steadying her nerves. "Jump," she whispered. The creatures obeyed instantly, leaping gracefully into the forest below. Amara followed, landed with a roll to absorb the impact. The forest was strange, alive with alien sounds and flickering lights. But it offered cover, and more importantly, it was unfamiliar to the hunters. From above, the hunters cursed, unable to follow easily. The terrain was treacherous, filled with roots, glowing plants, and uneven ground. Amara led the creatures deeper into the forest, feeling a sense of exhilaration. They were safe for now, but the real test was ahead. She knew one thing for certain. Humans were underestimated. The hunters had laughed when she screamed, thinking her small, fragile body could not matter. But she had called something powerful, and it had answered. Amara moved through the forest, side by side with her allies. The wind whispered through the alien trees, carrying a promise of more challenges, more dangers, and more opportunities. She had survived the first encounter, but the unexpected ally had changed everything. The hunters were no longer the only threat. They were the first warning. Somewhere deep in the forest, shadows moved, watching, waiting. Amara's grip on the strange metal she carried tightened. She was ready, and as the moons glimmered above, she realized something profound. This was only the beginning. The unexpected turning point had come, and she was determined to control it. The hunters had laughed when she screamed. They would not laugh again. The forest was alive. Strange glowing plants swayed in the wind, and the air hummed with a faint vibration that seemed almost alive. Amara moved carefully through the undergrowth, her creatures close behind her. Each step was measured. She could hear distant roars and the scraping of claws on rocks, warning her that the hunters had not given up. High above, the hunters regrouped. They had lost track of Amara in the forest, but their anger and pride fueled their determination. She could not escape. One hissed, his armored form glinting under the twin moons. "We are stronger. We are faster. She is only human." Another hunter shook his head. "Strength alone is not enough. Look at her creatures. She commands them. That is unnatural. That is dangerous." The first hunter's eyes narrowed. "Dangerous or not, we must capture her. The council will reward the one who brings her down. Do you want to fail?" The hunters spread out, careful not to step into the glowing plants. Knowing the forest was unfamiliar, every movement was calculated. Yet the forest itself seemed to resist them. Strange roots rose like traps, hidden rocks threatened their balance, and the creatures Amara controlled were moving silently, watching, waiting. Amara crouched behind a thick, twisted tree. Her heart beat steadily. She could feel the hunter's presence, subtle vibrations through the ground, the whispers of movement and the faint rustle of leaves. But she had the advantage. She knew the terrain. She had the creatures. And she had her mind. "Stay close," she whispered to the creatures. They obeyed, moving like shadows among the luminous flora. She raised a hand, pointing toward a narrow ravine. The creatures shifted, blocking the path behind them, herding the hunters toward a trap she had prepared. The first hunter stumbled upon a glowing root and cursed. "This forest is alive," he spat. "It fights us." Amara smirked. Not the forest, her allies did. She moved quietly along the side path, signaling the creatures. The second creature, taller and more imposing, shifted forward, creating an invisible wall of intimidation. The hunters hesitated, their confidence faltering. Amara had learned to anticipate. Every hunter had a style, a pattern. She had watched carefully. One always favored speed, another precision, and the leader relied on brute force. Using that knowledge, she crafted a plan. She would divide them, isolate them, and let her creatures handle the chaos. Suddenly, a branch snapped. One hunter had noticed her movement. He raised his glowing blade, sending a sharp arc of energy toward her hiding spot. Amara rolled to the side, narrowly avoiding the strike. The blade carved a deep gash into the trunk of the tree behind her. Sparks flew. "Now!" she shouted. The creature sprang into action. The first one lunged toward the hunter, its claws scraping against the forest floor. The hunter tried to retreat, but the forest itself seemed to conspire. Roots twisted around his legs, forcing him off balance. The second creature leaped, its massive form landing between the remaining hunters and their escape route. Amara dashed forward, moving quickly between trees, leading them toward a narrow cliff-edge path she had noticed earlier. The hunters, now panicked, struggled to keep pace. Every misstep brought them closer to danger. One hunter, the leader, roared in frustration. "Stop her! She cannot escape." But he did not understand. Escape was not Amara's goal. Control was. She wanted the hunters to follow exactly where she planned, to move like pieces in a game she had designed. Ahead, the narrow path ended at a steep drop, barely visible through the glowing fog. Amara signaled her creatures. The first creature blocked the hunter's view from above, growling low and threatening. The second creature took a position behind the hunters, cutting off retreat. The leader hesitated, sensing the trap, but pride and anger clouded his judgment. He stepped forward, pressing his advantage. Amara raised a hand and whispered a strange sound. The creatures responded instantly. The first creature let out a terrifying roar, shaking the ground. The hunter leader slipped, his boots sliding on the loose soil. He scrambled to regain balance, but it was too late. The narrow path could not support him and the force of the creature behind him. He tumbled down the cliff, grabbing roots to slow his fall, but the descent was long and punishing. Rocks scraped his armor, cutting deep lines across his limbs. He finally hit the bottom with a heavy crash, unconscious or worse. The remaining hunters froze, realizing their leader had fallen. Fear replaced arrogance. They looked at Amara with a mixture of awe and terror. She didn't flinch. She was calm, calculating. "This way," she whispered, leading them along the forest path, deeper into her planned trap. The hunters followed reluctantly. They knew her creatures were dangerous, but they had no choice. They were trapped in unfamiliar territory, guided by a human whose abilities they did not understand. Amara's mind raced. She needed more than just brute force. She needed ingenuity. She remembered a trick from her mentor, using the environment to her advantage. She scanned the forest floor, noting clusters of glowing plants. When disturbed, these plants released a fine, blinding powder. She could use that to disorient the hunters. Carefully, she led the creatures and the hunters toward a dense patch. With a subtle movement of her hand and a whispered sound, the creatures stirred the plants, kicking up clouds of powder. The hunters coughed and stumbled, their vision obscured. Amara took the opportunity to leap forward, guiding her allies to higher ground. The hunters struggled, blinded and disoriented. The forest echoed with their angry shouts and the creatures' growls. But the real test was yet to come. From the shadows, a new danger emerged. A second group of hunters, more experienced and deadly. They had tracked her through another path, aiming to intercept her escape. Amara's heart raced, but she did not panic. She assessed the situation quickly. The new hunters were approaching from the north, unaware of the trap she had set. She positioned her creatures strategically, one blocking the path behind, one in front, and she herself in the middle, guiding every move. The two groups of hunters were now at a deadly disadvantage. Confused, divided, and facing unknown creatures, they struggled to advance. Every step they took played into Amara's plan. She moved silently, whispering commands that the creatures followed with precision. The forest became a battlefield, but not in the way the hunters expected. It was a game of strategy, not strength alone. Amara's creatures were extensions of her will, moving with speed, agility, and cunning. Every misstep the hunters made was punished. Every hesitation was exploited. The hunters realized too late that they were trapped. The forest, the creatures, and Amara herself formed a perfect circle around them. Escape was impossible. Panic spread among them. They shouted orders to each other, but coordination failed. Amara's voice was calm, almost gentle, but it carried authority. "You cannot win," she said. "You underestimated humans. You underestimated the bond between us and the creatures of this world. You will learn respect, or you will be left behind." A massive roar echoed through the forest. The creatures advanced, not with mindless rage, but with calculated precision. One hunter tried to strike, but the first creature blocked him, sending him sprawling into the glowing plants. The powder rose into the air, blinding the remaining hunters. Amara seized the opportunity. She led the creatures and herself along a narrow path, twisting through the dense undergrowth. The hunters, blinded and disoriented, could not follow. Their shouts became desperate, fading as they struggled through the forest. At last, Amara paused at a high vantage point. Below, the hunters were scattered, confused, and defeated, not by sheer force, but by strategy, intelligence, and the unexpected power of the creature she commanded. She exhaled, her body trembling slightly from the adrenaline. She had survived another encounter. The hunter's dilemma had worked in her favor, and the creatures had proven their loyalty. But Amara knew this was only the beginning. The forest held more dangers, and the hunters would return, smarter, more prepared, and angrier. Yet for now, she allowed herself a moment of satisfaction. She had turned the hunters' strength into their weakness. She had shown that humans, clever and adaptable, could survive and even control the impossible. The creatures beside her lowered their massive heads, breathing heavily but alert. Amara reached out, touching the first one gently. "Good," she whispered. "We survived, but the real challenge is still ahead." She looked toward the deeper forest, where shadows shifted and the air hummed with unknown threats. Somewhere beyond, new dangers waited. The hunters were not defeated forever. They were learning, and Amara knew that when they returned, she would have to be even smarter, even faster, and even more prepared. For now, though, she allowed herself to feel a strange sense of triumph. The hunters had underestimated her, underestimated humans, and underestimated the creatures that now answered to her call. The forest was quiet again, but Amara could feel the tension lingering in the air. This was a warning, a challenge, a lesson for both the hunters and herself. And as the twin moons glimmered above, Amara smiled slightly. She had survived the hunters' dilemma. She had turned their plans against them, and she was ready for whatever came next. The game had changed. The hunters had learned fear, and Amara knew one thing for certain. Humans were never to be underestimated. The forest was alive with whispers. The glowing trees swayed as if aware of the approaching danger. Amara's heart beat steadily. She had survived the hunters' first attack, outsmarted them in the canyon, and now the hunters were regrouping somewhere deeper in the alien forest. She crouched behind a thick tree trunk, her creatures standing like silent sentinels on either side. The third, larger creature, the newcomer, stood slightly apart, its red eyes scanning the shadows with uncanny intelligence. Amara had begun to understand them. These creatures were not just obeying her commands blindly. They were calculating, responding to her intentions before she spoke them aloud. Above, the hunters whispered among themselves. They had lost their leader, their confidence shaken, yet their arrogance remained. "We cannot fail," one hissed. "She is human, but that does not mean she is invincible. We will adapt." "Adapt?" another growled. "She commands those monsters. One mistake, and we are dead." Amara's lips curved into a faint smile. Let them underestimate her. Let them think humans were fragile and weak. They had not seen what she was capable of. Not yet. She took a deep breath, scanning the terrain. The hunters were dividing into two groups, trying to flank her from both sides. They thought isolation would give them the advantage, but it played perfectly into her plan. She whispered a sound, low and deliberate. The creatures shifted immediately, positioning themselves to cut off one flank, while leaving the path open toward the deeper forest. Her eyes flicked to the hunters approaching from the north. They were moving cautiously, aware of her power but still overconfident. Amara raised her hand. The first creature let out a low, rumbling growl that vibrated through the ground. The hunters froze, sensing the sheer weight of its presence. Then the second creature advanced, claws scraping against rocks, eyes glowing brighter. The hunters realized too late that the narrow forest path left them trapped. "You humans are clever," one of the hunters muttered, "but cleverness cannot save you here." Amara's voice was calm, but it carried authority, a command they could feel even in her words. Strength alone is nothing. Intelligence and strategy decide who survives. The creatures obeyed instantly, moving in unison. Their massive bodies flowed like shadows, cutting off the hunters' escape. Amara stayed behind them, unseen but directing every action. She could see the fear creeping into their eyes, the first real fear they had felt in their lives. The forest itself seemed to respond. Roots twisted along the ground, forming barriers. The glowing plants reacted to movement, releasing a fine powder that made it hard to see. The hunters stumbled, disoriented and panicked. Amara saw her chance. She grabbed a long branch, tipped with a sharp stone, and led the creatures deeper into the narrow path. The hunters were forced to follow, unable to retreat, unable to advance without risk. Each step they took was guided by her strategy. Each movement brought them closer to the trap she had prepared. Suddenly, the largest creature, the red-eyed one, leaped high onto a cliff edge, crashing down among the hunters. Rocks tumbled, creating chaos. One hunter fell to the ground, his armor battered. The others hesitated, realizing the forest itself had become a weapon in Amara's hands. She whispered again, a strange melodic sound that seemed almost like a chant. The creatures responded instantly. They moved with precision, cutting off all escape routes. The hunters' confidence shattered completely. They were surrounded, outmatched and outsmarted. Amara's voice cut through the chaos. "You thought humans were weak. You thought we were fragile. But strength is not only in muscle. It is in mind, in strategy, and in understanding. And we are stronger than you imagined." The hunters froze. One of them, the leader who had survived the canyon, stared at her wide-eyed. He realized that every step, every movement, every obstacle had been part of her plan. She had led them exactly where she wanted. And now came the twist. Amara raised her hands, and the creatures responded like extensions of her will. She did not need weapons. She did not need brute force. Her control over the creatures, her understanding of the terrain, and her calm precision were enough to decide the outcome. The hunters attempted to attack, but every move they made was countered. The first creature blocked, the second tripped, the third cornered. Rocks tumbled, roots wrapped around limbs, powder blinded eyes. One by one, the hunters were neutralized, not killed but incapacitated. Amara did not seek bloodshed. She sought control and survival. One hunter tried a desperate strike, swinging a glowing blade at her. Amara stepped aside with perfect timing, letting the creature intercept. The hunter flew backward, crashing into a tree. Another rushed forward, but the ground beneath him shifted subtly, thanks to Amara's guidance of the terrain. He tripped, sprawling in a cloud of glowing powder. The creatures were not acting blindly. They were thinking, judging, and responding to Amara's subtle commands. And the hunters realized something terrifying. They were facing a human who could bend nature and alien predators alike to her will. The leader finally understood. She is not ordinary. She is controlling them. Amara stepped into view, her face calm, her eyes steady. "Humans survive because we learn, adapt, and lead. You hunted us thinking we were prey. Now you see the truth. You underestimated the intelligence and courage of a human." The hunters hesitated. Pride battled fear, but fear won. They had never encountered a human like this. One who could command creatures larger than themselves, use the terrain as a weapon, and anticipate every move. Amara's creatures advanced slowly, not to attack, but to intimidate. The hunters had no choice but to retreat, stumbling over roots and rocks, realizing that survival required withdrawal. As they disappeared into the forest, Amara exhaled deeply. She looked at the creatures beside her. They lowered their heads, acknowledging her as leader. She placed a hand on the largest one, feeling the strength and intelligence within it. They were allies, but also friends. For the first time, she allowed herself a smile. Humans were underestimated too often. Today, she had shown them their strength, not just in survival, but in command, strategy, and connection. Yet, the forest was not silent. In the distance, she could hear movements, subtle vibrations to the ground, and whispers of shadows unseen. The hunters were gone, but the danger was not over. Amara knew the truth. Humans could survive, yes, but survival required more than strength. It required understanding, intuition, and the ability to turn even impossible into an advantage. She walked deeper into the glowing forest, the creatures at her side, alert and obedient. The forest seemed to watch her, alive in ways she could barely understand. Every step she took was a message, to the hunters, to the world, and to herself. Humans were not prey. Humans could lead. Humans could command. The hunters had laughed when she screamed. They had underestimated her. But now, they had learned something new. And so had she. The twist was complete. She had revealed the true power of humans. Not in weapons, not in brute force, but in intelligence, courage, and the ability to inspire loyalty even in creatures far stronger than themselves. Amara paused, looking toward the glowing horizon. She knew this was not the end. The hunters would return, stronger and smarter. But now she was ready. She had allies, knowledge, and strategy on her side. The forest whispered around her, and she smiled. Humans were underestimated no longer. The HFY moment had arrived. And for the first time, Amara truly felt the weight of her strength. The forest was quiet now, but not peaceful. Glowing plants swayed gently in the wind, and the soft hum of the alien world carried through the dense undergrowth. Amara stood atop a small hill. Her creatures crouched beside her, watching the forest floor with alert eyes. Every shadow, every movement, every faint sound could hide danger. She breathed slowly, trying to calm the adrenaline still racing through her veins. The hunters had retreated, scattered and shaken. Their arrogance had been broken. They had underestimated her, underestimated humans, underestimated the bond she shared with the creatures of this world. Amara knelt beside the largest creature, running a hand along its armored scales. "Good work," she whispered. "We survived, but this is only the beginning." The creatures responded with low, rumbling growls, almost as if acknowledging her words. They had become more than allies. They were partners in survival. They trusted her, obeyed her, and, in their own way, respected her. But even as relief washed over her, Amara knew better than to let her guard down. The hunters were out there, regrouping. They would return, stronger, smarter, and more prepared. And beyond them, there were threats she could not yet imagine. The forest was vast, and the alien world was full of dangers she had not yet encountered. Amara's eyes swept the horizon. The twin moons cast pale light over the glowing forest, illuminating paths she had yet to explore. She could sense movement in the distance, a faint ripple through the trees, subtle vibrations in the soil. Something was coming, not the hunters. Something else. She stood and brushed the dust from her clothes, her mind already planning. The creatures followed, silent and obedient, their eyes scanning every corner of the forest. Amara had learned to communicate with them not just through commands, but through intention, posture, and subtle sounds. She had never imagined that humans could develop such connection with alien life, but here she was proving it. The first creature nudged her gently, sensing her thoughts. She smiled faintly. "Yes," she whispered. "We must keep moving. We cannot stay in one place for long." As they advanced, Amara noticed something unusual, a narrow canyon leading deeper into forest, almost hidden by thick foliage. It was a risky path, but it offered cover and strategic advantage. She motioned for the creatures to follow and entered cautiously. Inside the canyon, the air was cooler, and the light from the moons barely penetrated the dense canopy. The forest seemed to press in around them, alive with whispers of unseen life. Every step was careful, every movement deliberate. The creatures flanked her, their massive forms shielding her from view. Suddenly, a faint sound caught her attention. A distant scream, sharp and unfamiliar. Her pulse quickened. It was not human. It was something else, something in distress. The creatures stiffened, ears swiveling, eyes glowing brighter than Amara's instincts told her to investigate. She signaled the creatures, and they moved silently through the undergrowth, following the sound. The scream repeated, louder this time, echoing to the canyon. Ahead, she saw a small clearing. In the center, a creature unlike any she had seen before was trapped beneath fallen rocks. Its scales shimmered in iridescent colors, and its eyes reflected both fear and intelligence. The hunters had not found this one yet. It was alone, vulnerable, and desperate. Amara approached slowly, speaking in the soft, commanding tone she had learned the creatures understood. "It's okay," she said. "We will help you." The trapped creature looked at her warily, muscles tensing, ready to strike or flee. But there was something in her voice, something in her presence, that calmed it. The creatures flanking her moved gently, using their strength to lift the rocks carefully, creating a path for the trapped creature to escape. It hesitated for a moment, then bolted into the forest, disappearing into the shadows. Amara exhaled, feeling a strange sense of satisfaction. She had not only survived, she had saved another life, forming a connection that might prove important later. But even as she turned to continue her journey, she sensed movement behind her. Shadows shifted along the canyon walls, almost too fast to see. Her creatures growled low, ears flattening. From the shadows emerged figures, hunters, but not the ones she had faced before. These were different, larger, more armored, their eyes cold and calculating. They had tracked her, observing her moves from afar. They had learned from their failure. Amara did not panic. She stepped forward, standing tall among her creatures. "You underestimated humans once," she said, her voice calm but carrying authority. "You will not make the same mistake again." The hunters paused, realizing that she was not alone. The creatures flanked her, eyes glowing, muscles tense. The forest itself seemed to respond, roots shifting slightly, leaves rustling, creating an atmosphere of anticipation and dread. The lead hunter stepped forward cautiously. "We underestimated you before," he admitted, his voice low. "But this time we are ready. You cannot command them forever. We will take you down." Amara's lips curved into a faint smile. "Command is not about force," she replied. "It is about understanding, strategy, and trust. You will see the difference." With that, she moved forward, leading the creatures through the dense forest, drawing the hunters into a path she had prepared. Every step was calculated, every movement a trap. Rocks tumbled, roots shifted, and glowing plants released clouds of powder, disorienting the hunters. The creatures moved with precision, cutting off escape routes and protecting Amara. The hunters struggled, frustrated and angry, but unable to match her strategy. One by one, they were forced to retreat, realizing they were not fighting just a human. They were fighting a mind capable of outthinking and outmaneuvering them at every turn. Amara led her creatures to a high cliff overlooking the forest. Below, the hunters regrouped, shaken and battered, realizing that their arrogance had been their downfall. They had underestimated her, underestimated humans, and underestimated the bond between her and the creatures she commanded. She looked out over the alien landscape, the twin moons casting pale light over the forest canopy. Somewhere beyond, other dangers waited. But for now, she had survived. She had proven the strength, intelligence, and adaptability of humans. The creatures beside her lowered their heads, acknowledging her leadership. Amara reached out, touching the largest one gently. "We are ready," she whispered. "Whatever comes next, we will face it together." A sudden movement caught her eye, a flicker of light between the trees. Her heart quickened. It was subtle, almost invisible, but it was there. Something watched her, something unknown. Amara's pulse quickened, but she did not panic. She had faced hunters, predators, and the wild unknown. She could face whatever came next. The forest whispered around her, alive with secrets and hidden dangers. The hunters were gone for now, but they would return. And when they did, Amara would be ready. She turned to the creatures, her eyes reflecting determination and understanding. "This is only the beginning," she said. "We have survived the unexpected. Now, we prepare for what comes next." The creatures growled softly, a sound of agreement, and together, they disappeared into the glowing forest, shadows among shadows, ready for the next challenge. The twin moons hung above, silent witnesses to the power and intelligence of a human who had turned the impossible into her advantage. The hunters had laughed when she screamed. They would not laugh again. And somewhere deep in the forest, new eyes watched, waiting for the right moment to strike. Amara did not know them yet, but she would be ready. Humans were underestimated. Not anymore. The unexpected turning point had become the beginning of a legend.